so I can see your questions as we begin. So today I was really inspired to jump on here and talk with you all about emotions and our digestion and cravings and all kinds of powerful ideas around this topic. And I'm also really excited because there is a course that I have called My Nutrition 360, and I'm going to mention a little bit about that for those of you who have questions or might be of interest, but tune into this. So, to begin this topic, I just spoke on this, and it's a topic I spoke about it live, I should clarify. And as I was speaking to this group, it dawned on me, I've given this talk so many times, I've never given it the same way twice. And so this is going to be a little bit off the cuff, but I do want to encourage those of you who want to, you can leave some comments, you can ask me some questions, or you can always go to my website, reneejane.com, and shoot me any questions or thoughts through there also. So sometimes when we talk about digestion or we talk about our emotions, this tends to be one of those conversations that can be a little awkward for some people. It's sometimes something that we don't know if we can connect with, or we resist it. And, I just want to emphasize that the goal of this conversation, and I really want to look at it as a conversation, is to bring more self-awareness to you. So one thing that I really love to input into people's brains when I'm working with them. I've been doing this kind of work. I'll tell you more about me in a little while if we haven't met before, but I've been doing this kind of work for over a decade. And the goal is always for you to know your own potential, for you to become more self-aware, and dare I say, for you to become a self-healer. And what that means is that you know your body better than anybody does. And anyone you work with, whether that be me or someone else, and hopefully you have all kinds of different people surrounding you that can help support you in your healing journey and your health and wellness, that those individuals are there to be a reflection back to you, to help you see yourself. And but coming back to self, coming back to what your body's telling you and your intuition and what's really going on in your body is really one of the most important things. And then most importantly, how we can tell the difference in what our body is saying and what those cues mean. So as I begin this, a lot of times when people come to talk to me, or they have questions about working with me, or they show up to some of the talks that I give, they feel pretty overwhelmed. Sometimes they feel pretty stuck, and they have this, what we'll call, complicated relationship with food. And I often get this literal sentence in emails all the time: I have food issues. And so to begin this conversation, I like to just talk about that for a minute, what food issues mean, because our relationship to food and our relationship to our body, and actually our relationship even to sex, is a very primal relationship. It's really rooted in what we may call our foundation or our root chakra. And in our best place, we can feel very in touch with our senses, very sensual with our body and our food. Sensual not meaning sexual, by the way, sensual meaning in touch with all of the senses. All the senses come alive. At our worst, we can also become addictive or obsessive with food or body, and really struggle to find connection and feel very detached from it. And so when I give this talk again, one of the things that I want to come back to is our digestive system first. And that is our root kind of idea here, the core of how everything else is really functioning in your body. And giving a talk on digestive stuff or the digestive system is a huge talk in and of itself. I'm not going to go into lots and lots of detail, but I am going to talk a little bit about that and give you some suggestions. So hopefully if you're tuning into this and you have something to take notes with, you might want to do that. And I'm just pulling up my notes here too, because it helps me to to see. Okay. So it's deeply frustrating when we feel like we're doing all the right things, but we're just not getting the results. And many times when somebody comes to talk to me or work with me, it's often around that idea that they are in craving, or that they've done really well. And when I say done really well, they have followed the plan they thought they were supposed to be following for a long time until they weren't following it anymore. And perhaps maybe there's been what we'll call yo-yo dieting. There has been a vicious cycle of trying so many different kinds of things and then not getting the results that they want. And I'm going to share a little personal story around our emotions and our digestive system in my life in a little while. But what I want to do is I want to start by telling you that no one has a body like you do. And there is no cookie cutter plan. That does not exist. And anybody who tells you that you need to follow this plan because it's the one that's going to work, unless they have really gotten to know you very, very well and know all the ins and outs of your systems in your body, don't pay attention to that, because your goal is to figure out what plan works for your body, what works for your digestive system, what works for your hormonal system, and what supports your nervous system, which I'm going to get to a little bit more here in a little while. So I can tell you that for so many, many years, I have tried to do so much of this work on my own. I started as a health practitioner approximately, I think it was about 11 years ago now. And I started out in life coaching even longer. So in some capacity, I've been helping people for about 20 years. Time has flown. And for a lot of those years, I had coaches, or I had therapists, or different kinds of practitioners, but a lot of the time around my food, I really tried to do it on my own because I had such a passion for this stuff, where I eventually discovered that I did. And what I learned is that can only get you so far, because sometimes we can't see our own stuff. And many of us know how to get healthier already. You know this. You stop eating crap. You move your body more. You eat good things. You don't sit on the couch all the time and be sedentary. So if we already know what to do, why is it that we don't get the results that we want? That's the question. So if we know how to do it, for the most part, eat healthier things, eat more vegetables, eat more fruit, eat more fiber, drink more water. Like, these are not light bulb moments for many of us, but why aren't we getting the results? And so the reason why is that we have to go deeper. We have to look at where we're hiding. We have to look at where we're numbing out. We have to look at some of the patterns that have been in place, likely since we were children, about what we're not feeling and what we're not allowing ourself or our body to experience. And those are usually deep-rooted reasons. They're usually the reasons that we're stuck. And so, these things, these emotional patterns that we have, they impact everything. And I want to kind of give you this general idea today. There's a beautiful quote by Gabor Mate, and this quote goes like this: when you shut down emotion, you're also affecting your immune system, your nervous system. So the repression of emotion, which is, by the way, in his words, a survival strategy, becomes the source of our physiological illness later on. And so, in a nutshell, what he is saying so eloquently is that if we are not in touch with our emotional selves, if we are not in touch with the stuff underneath the emotions, which is called trauma, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment, then it is directly impacting our immune system and directly impacting our nervous system, and then therefore manifesting as issues in our body. And the beautiful thing is that there's so much science around this now that has caught up with the many of us who have had a knowing of this for a very long time. A couple of things that I want to talk to you about first, because your body's taken the hit, and if we are not in touch with what's going on in our emotional self, then our physical self is going to take the hit. If we're not in touch with what's going on with our mental capacities, our physical or spiritual body is also taking a hit. And as I do this work with people for over a decade, what I like to describe it as holistic healing is this is nutrition for your soul, where we focus on the emotional and the mental and the spiritual and also the physical. And then it can't just be one, it has to be all of it. And so thinking about this nutrition piece, let's go back to our digestive system, because I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think by the time, if you listen to this whole idea, you'll see it come together. So in your digestive system, we'll call it your gut health. And for those of you who don't know me, when I say your gut, I'm talking about all kinds of things: small intestine, large intestine, stomach, colon, like, you know, we're describing that general area. Most of your immune system lives inside your digestive system. And in fact, you have something in your body called a lymphatic system. And when I was in nutrition school, I forget what teacher it was right now. If it comes to me, I'll give him due credit. But he used to call, I think it was John Douliard, he used to call your lymphatic system your drains. And I always appreciated that. So we have, 600-700 lymph nodes throughout our whole body, and they're all connected through these drains. And we want the drains to be working, just like if you have, you know, a really nice plumbing system in your brand new house, you want the plumbing system to be working. And around our digestive system, if you even take your hand and you put it on your low belly and you kind of draw this circle around your hand, that is the largest part of your lymphatic system. And so if that gets clogged up, and that's usually the place it gets clogged up first, then it directly impacts your digestive system, which, by the way, as I mentioned before, is also where your immune system lives. So that's a really important piece to just become really aware of. And so the other little piece here around our digestive system that's a fun fact is that, how many of you have ever heard of the term serotonin before? So I'm sure you have. It's the happy hormone. And 90% of our serotonin is actually in our gut. 90% of it. So often when we think about being happy or we think about serotonin, we're thinking about here, thinking about our brain. And although that's a big piece of it, and focusing our attention and focusing our mind is very important, we can't ignore, again, getting to the root cause, that if our digestive system is a mess and our lymphatic system isn't flowing and our nervous system, which I'll get to in a moment, is also not supported and in a place of stress or trauma, then it makes it really, really difficult for us to be happy. It makes it very difficult for us to feel connected to whatever we're doing. And dare I say, maybe even difficult to feel present and feel in a state of being in our body. So, you know, the goal here as we do this work is a few things. One is that we're focusing on how can we support your digestive system. And there's lots of ways, and I'll give you some of those in a minute. The other one is how can, as we support the digestive system, we support your immune system, which is really important because that's what's going to keep you healthy. Then there's another piece, and that is your nervous system. I'm going to come to that in a minute. And then we also talk about the emotional self, or our emotional wellness. And this is the holistic healing, because the goal here is to, what I'll call, free our trapped emotions in our body. Now, let me give you a quick example of this. So years and years ago, when I first got started in the personal development space, I was 19 years old, and I was invited to this workshop, and they called it a play shop back then. And I remember them passing out these little pieces of paper that had all these affirmations on them, and they were probably from someone as amazing as Louise Hay. And I remember thinking at that time, okay, these are really great, but like none of them were true for me. And so I really just at that time discounted affirmations. And I thought, well, you know, I can say I love myself, and I can say, you know, great things are happening all the time, and I can say all these things, but if it doesn't feel true for me, why should I bother? And I've had many clients also say this to me over the years also, that I don't want to say that because it doesn't feel true. And here's why it doesn't feel true, is because we have not taken the time to honor what is true. And so I have this course, it's I'll tell you more about it at the end of our chat, but it's called My Nutrition 360. And I don't know that you can really see this too well, but this is what's called the feelings wheel. And you can see on here we have sad and mad and scared and peaceful and powerful and joyful. Those are around the center. And then all of these different emotions extend outward. And by the way, this is just a fraction. There's so many other emotions. And the first goal is for us to begin a practice of honesty. And so this is step one. If we were to create steps here, we begin to acknowledge, what is it that I'm really feeling? Because in our culture particularly, and I say culture, I mean just the culture of the world at large, but also it could be a familial culture, it could be the culture in your community. You know, really looking at that is also very important. But that culture teaches us often that just let that go. Don't think about that. Focus your attention over here. And there is a powerful, powerful presence in being able to acknowledge an emotion that we have. Now, it doesn't mean that we stay with the emotion forever. It doesn't mean that we live in that and we, spend hours and hours and hours in it. In fact, I don't have the time today, but there is a very specific amount of time that it shows us that it's very helpful to sit with an emotion. And then once we are able to experience that emotion and we're able to learn, like, where does that go? Why is that here? Where is it coming from? And what is it saying about us? Then we can point our focus and our mind and our direction to another place. But a lot of us don't do that. We, don't know what the emotion is. We don't know how to name it. We don't know how to experience it. The second step about this is really connecting to what's going on in our body. So to tell you just a brief bit more about me. So again, my name is Renee Jane. Many of you who might be watching this know me, and if you don't, I'm introduce myself very briefly. But so I'm an aspiring author. I've been writing a book for a while, but it is coming along. And I'm also a holistic nutrition practitioner. I'm a functional therapist and what's called a somatic life coach. And somatic means body. And so what this means is that we're connecting our emotions and our body and really intuitively getting to know our bodies. And I provide private coaching, and I also provide group programs, as well as do a lot of public speaking and consulting corporately and things like that. So back to my conversation here, somatic. So as we get to know our emotions, then we move into our body and we start to figure out, okay, these emotions actually live in our body. And this isn't just some hokey stuff that I'm making up. We know through science that on a cellular level, we store our emotions in our body. In our cells, we store our emotions. And so if we don't release those emotions, we do not honor them or experience them, they get stuck and they get buried. And then we form protection, so to speak, around that area of our body. And that's what creates disease. And when I say it that way, I mean like we are not in ease. And so it creates disease, and it creates a area of our body that usually has some trauma, right? Physical trauma or symptoms that we might experience. So just think about this as a simple example. You know, if you have a belly ache, your stomach's not feeling well. And how many of us experience this on a regular basis, but we discount it? So people come to me all the time. They have constipation issues, or they have diarrhea, or they have irritable bowel syndrome, or they have a lot of issues with digesting their food, or perhaps they're running to the bathroom all the time and just like not feeling well about it. Or maybe there's autoimmune issues going on, or just not being able to digest certain foods, and then feeling like I don't even know what to eat anymore because all these things are affecting me and bothering me. And I could go on and on and on. There's so many stories. And when I started out in this business as a practitioner, which was about over a decade ago, and I'm using just general numbers here, but thinking back, I think about maybe if I had 10 clients then, maybe one or two of them might have had some digestive issues or what I might have considered beginning of an autoimmune issue. Nowadays, if I had 10 clients come to see me as just a hypothetical number, I would say all of them have digestive issues. Pretty much every person has some kind of issue digestively these days. And a very large percentage of people have symptoms that are undiagnosed, usually autoimmune related. And I'm not saying everyone has autoimmune issues, but it has become way worse than I have ever imagined it to be. And so this is where we get curious. Again, as I mentioned, if you were just joining at the beginning of this call, the goal here is self-awareness. And so I like to remind everybody that practicing this judgment-free zone, it's a really beautiful dance when we start to learn how to connect our emotions with our body and with what's going on in our digestive system, and then learning how do we feed ourselves and what is it that my body needs and how do I honor all of that at the same time. And when I call it a beautiful dance, I really see it that way. I can see it so easily. And so one thing that might be important for you to realize is just about getting curious. It doesn't mean you have to know all the answers. It doesn't mean you have to figure out all of this right now, but it just means that it's important for you to pay attention and to start maybe taking, well, I'll put it this way, put the fork down when you're eating, right? And give yourself a moment. And I'll give you some more tips about that in a little bit. But, these chronic symptoms that we have, often like the chronic gas or indigestion or diarrhea or constipation, maybe we've become so darn used to those that they just seem normal. And I'm here to tell you they are not normal. If you have any of that stuff going on, then those are symptoms that you have an issue with your digestive system, and it's important to look at it. And this is not to shame or blame. It's not about guilt. This is just awareness. And so, I'll give you another simple example. So this shoulder, which is so much better, by the way, but I think it was 3 years ago, I did something to it, and well, it was emotional, gallbladder related. I mean, things that I'm aware of. But anyway, this shoulder was giving me problems. But I would say about a year in, I hadn't really been able to solve it. The shoulder was still bothering me. And before I knew it, it just became normal. I just kind of it's my thing. I got a shoulder thing. Years and years ago, I used to get horrible migraine headaches. And that was another one for me. I just kind of surrendered that it was just going to be what I had to live with. And what really got me into health and wellness, I used to be a cigarette smoker. I used, Marlboro Lights, smoked a pack a day. I lived on Coca-Cola and potato chips and fast food, and I was very addicted to sugar, and I didn't cook. I was a very unhealthy individual and in terms of my body. And I say that in the sense that it was manifesting in all these different unhealthy ways. I had a lot of digestive issues. I had shingles. They thought that I had leukemia, which I didn't think, thankfully, but I had really no white blood cells functioning, or to speak of, I should say, and all kinds of things going on. And at that time, I felt powerless. I just felt like, oh, well, this is just going to be how things are. And so what I want to do is I just want to help you, wherever you may be, if you're listening to this today, to remind yourself that it doesn't have to be that way, and that there is another way. Because sometimes in our culture, we paint this picture where we think, if only I had the right diet plan, if only I had, maybe it's and I'm generalizing here, but maybe it's the keto plan or the paleo plan or vegan or vegetarian or the, intuitive eating, and I could go on and on. By the way, all of those plans, every one of them could work for all of us for a short period of time. They could work for everyone. But then we get to the point where we have to go deeper. And that's the conversation that I'm really wanting to have with you today. We're getting to the root cause. And so our digestive system, it needs support. It needs some healing. And it's been, I've worked in this industry for a long time. I have over 3,000 coaching hours with clients, and, helping them find their holistic healing results. And I've really come to this idea that there's 4 root causes. This is my observational evidence, so to speak, that really stand in our way. Number 1 root cause is emotional trauma wounds. emotional trauma wounds are at the root cause of what keep clients stuck and self-sabotaging their success. So I want to take a minute and I want to just talk about what I mean by emotional trauma wounds. So if you joined me earlier, you may have seen I held up this really, I think it's cool, and I know it's small and you can't really see it, but this is the feelings wheel, and this just kind of illustrates how many different kinds of feelings that we have. And so one example of this might be, I'm just going to pick one. So feeling mad, okay? So in here, if you kind of map it out, mad can also lead to critical. It can also lead to feeling frustrated. It also can lead to selfish, and jealous and furious, right? And skeptical. So there's all these different kinds of emotions. Most of us are not over here naming these things. We might not even recognize it. We might have, especially on social media, we might have this twinge of jealousy, for example, or we might have a feeling of criticism, and it could be self-criticism or it could be criticism of somebody else. And in those particular instances, we are not often like tracing that back to where did that come from? Where did that come from? And where it came from, I'm going to tell you, is trauma. Now, trauma with a small t is important, and there's also trauma with a capital T. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that every single person has some form of trauma in their life. So grandma or grandpa died when you were young and it really impacted you. Or maybe you were bullied on the school bus. Or perhaps, your dog passed away and it was really hard for you when you were younger. Or maybe your parents got a divorce. Or maybe it was a bigger kind of trauma. There was a house fire. Or maybe you survived a war. Maybe there was abuse that was either sexual or physical or emotional in nature. These are all different kinds of trauma experiences. And many of the people who come to work with me, and especially where we work around their digestive system and the somatic healing of reconnecting with our bodies, often when people come to me, they have no idea that they have any trauma. They're often saying things, some people do. I should say that. Some people do. But a lot of them will say, like, I had a great childhood. My parents were great. Everything was wonderful. And this is not me sitting here. I want to be clear. This is not where we need to go back in life and like seek out problems. That's not what I'm saying. This is just a recognition that there have been traumas in childhood for you, and that those really caused certain kinds of emotions to be suppressed. It caused certain kinds of patterns within you to become ingrained. And it created a response where you either were going to freeze and not know what to do, or flee, or go into fight or flight mode. There's various kinds of ways we express trauma. And then what happens is we create coping mechanisms in order to deal with that trauma. And often our coping mechanisms have a lot to do with unhealthy relationship patterns, and those relationship patterns not only with other people and ourselves, but it's also a relationship with food. So we use that food as a way to help us feel better. And so that's really when I do this work with people. We talk about this emotional trauma, and I go out and I say, okay, emotional trauma is one of the biggest things that keeps us stuck with our food and our body. It's one of the biggest reasons that we keep self-sabotaging ourselves, is because we haven't looked at that trauma, and we haven't not only looked at it, but we haven't figured out how to heal it. Or heal is not a word I love using, so I might scratch that one, but how we can experience it differently and release it from our body, because we can do that with trauma. It's not a thing that is there forever. Okay, so I mentioned that there's 4 root causes. That was number 1. Number 2 is the state of a person's microbiome, and gut flora is at the root of most all, if not every, health issue. So the microbiome is a whole conversation that's so fascinating in and of itself. But in essence, that is our spark. That is our battery. It's in our gut, right? It's in our body that is keeping us full of energy. And so when our microbiome has been diminished, and I'll explain a few reasons why that might be, then we don't have energy. not only do we not have energy, but it's impacting our digestive system, our ability to not only assimilate the nutrients that we want to take in, but it's also making it very, very hard for us to maintain a good energy level in our body. So if we feel tired all the time and we feel exhausted, then this is part of it. Again, number one, it's old trauma wounds and needing support there. And then two, it's our microbiome needing support, our gut flora, which I'll get to some ideas around that in a minute. Number three root cause issue here is that our mind and limiting thoughts keep us under this illusion that we are separate from self. And so that's a big idea. But in essence, we can get stuck in our minds that keeps us feeling very separate from self. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of times we think that, well, I'm from here up, but everything down here is not mine. Right? There's a lot of people who have come to me very vulnerably over the years who've needed some help with their health, and they have said, I just wish I could cut off pieces of my body. I can't stand my body. They'll say, I don't want to even look in the mirror. I don't feel like this is even me anymore. These are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So when I say feel separate from self, we don't feel connection to body anymore, and we also don't feel connected to self with a capital S, meaning we don't feel connected in our being, in our presence anymore, and we look outside. This was a big huge growing for me throughout the course of the last 20 years of my life, of realizing that the answers were not all outside of me. I thought that they were. I thought that I could find everything out there. And that's a really big idea when it comes to our body, because sometimes we think, again, this diet plan or this particular workout plan or this particular idea that so-and-so shared on a YouTube video is going to be the thing that solves all of my problems. And in reality, the goal here again is self-awareness and really reconnecting to our body and knowing that we're not separate, which again, that idea in itself is, all these are big ideas, but I want to talk about what the root causes are because they're very important. And then the fourth one is this false belief that our own willpower must be lacking. And here's what I mean by that. So a lot of people come to me, particularly around cravings or issues with food addiction or obsession, or even particularly with sugar addiction. And I think that happens also because that had been a big part of my recovery story, right? And I always like to say I'm Renee and I'm a recovering sugar addict. And sugar has become a gift for me now in a sense, because it's taught me so much about myself and reconnecting with self. But for a while, I was so obsessed with sugar and I couldn't stop eating it. And I would tell a lot of stories about how, I would have the Oreo cookies in my house and I couldn't stop eating them. So I would just eat the entire bag so it would just be gone. And not everyone has that kind of relationship with sugar, but that was my experience. And one of the things that I used to say to myself is, if I just had a little bit more willpower. And I know a lot of people say that also, that they'll literally write to me, I just need a little bit more willpower and I can get over all these cravings. And what I want to share with you is that it doesn't have as much to do with willpower as you might think. A little bit, but not that much. We have sugar is a big conversation, but we have a physiological response to sugar that's very addictive because it is an addictive substance. It's a white powder, but we also it's that example again where we're lacking in this, what I'll call our spiritual practice, and that is this core essence of being present in our being. And we have been programmed from our childhood trauma to reach for the sugar to help us cope with the emotions that we are not used to feeling or naming or experiencing. And so again, it comes back to where do we go from here? Well, step one that I mentioned earlier is really about getting honest. And that honesty, you think you're honest, and then you realize there's like a whole nother level of it. And I don't mean just honest with other people. It's just really being honest about like, what am I really feeling? What do I really need right now is a good question to ask. So as I mentioned, there's these 4 root causes, and 62 million people are suffering right now with digestive issues. And I'm going to kind of wrap up a little bit on that topic, but I do want to mention it because, there's, $87 billion being spent or something close to that number right now on direct medical costs because of digestive issues. And so there's literally pharmaceutical companies that are profiting off of our digestive issues, and not a lot of people really connecting this emotional self and digestive or physical nutritional self with it. So as I mentioned, I want to give you a few ideas of how we can start to support ourselves. So the first one, when we look at our digestive system, number 1 is water. And I know that sounds so simple. And, I know you didn't all come here to just hear me say drink more water, but truthfully, when somebody comes to work with me, that's the number 1 thing we talk about. And we don't do anything else until I know you're drinking sufficient amount of water. Because if you're not hydrated, your nervous system, by the way, which is going to help you release trauma when that's calmed down. Like, again, like from my perspective as a practitioner, I'm thinking, okay, how can I calm this person's nervous system down with them, right? How can I give them some tools to help them support this nervous system in calming down? Because if your nervous system, and I'm going to use the word vibration, you may call it hokey, I don't really care, but I think it's a very good visual. If your nervous system is vibrating like this, and it has been your whole life, you don't recognize that. You have been used to it your whole life. It's like a level of chaos, so to speak, that you've always been used to. But there's maybe another way for you to calm that down. And when you calm it down, that vibration, everything that you attract is completely different. And it's very powerful. And it's really hard to calm down the nervous system without using powerful herbs and tools and somatic healing, where we can express and honor emotion and release, and where we can use some of the somatic tools. But if we're not hydrated, it makes all of that like 10 times harder. Okay, the next piece is your immune system and your digestive system and your brain and your endocrine system. Like everything literally is run on water. So staying so hydrated. And how do you know if you're hydrated? Well, half your body weight in ounces is how much water you need. So, if, you're 150 pounds, you divide that in half, and that's how many ounces of water you need to be drinking. And at first you're going to pee a lot, and that's okay, but your body will eventually calm down and absorb, and you won't be racing to the bathroom quite as often. Another one is a lot more fiber. We need so much more fiber in our body. And so again, we're remembering that if we really want to do this emotional work and calming of our nervous system, maybe you've been through some tough things and there's been emotional stuff going on in your life. You need to be nurturing your body with really healthy foods. I'll give you a quick personal example. I said I was going to share it with you. So knock on wood, but I really don't get sick too often, which is really wonderful. It shows that all the things I'm practicing are working. And just recently, I experienced some grief, and some emotion came up around some things in my life. And that happens for everybody, right? So, you experience it, you feel it, you go through some of the processes of grief, and grief kind of comes in waves. And as that was happening for me, I noticed that I needed to feed myself a little bit better than normal, right? I didn't feel hungry, honestly. So I needed to like force myself to have the nourishment and the nutrients. And I wanted to share this personal example with you because I think that it's really relevant, especially in today's day and age, that we don't often want to eat the healthy things. For many of us, we tend to eat what when we're stressed out? We eat crap. We eat what's called the standard American diet. SAD. I didn't make that up myself, but the SAD diet. And this is packaged and processed and hydrogenated and high fructose corn syrup and things that come in cans, and they're full of all kinds of stuff that we don't want in our body. So when we're stressed or we're sad or we're feeling lots of feelings and maybe not knowing what to do with them, we tend to want to control. And we're in that place of control. We usually look for food that can make us feel better. We don't often think to eat the fiber and the water and the healthy proteins and things like that. And so I was in this place of knowing that I needed to do those things, and I was. And still, I got a super bad sore throat and a little stuffy nose, which you may even hear. I have been a little under the weather the last couple days, and I'm actually most proud because it's really only lasted a couple days, and I feel more like myself today than I felt in a really long time. But also, it's a really testament to how much those emotions and how much grief has a direct impact on our digestive system, and how I haven't really been sick, again, knocking on wood, in a couple years. But when all that comes up, wow, look at how my body just kind of shuts down. And so we like to blame sickness sometimes, or immunity, on everyone else. Well, I was around so-and-so, or I was on an airplane and I got sick, or I was at a school thing and a bunch of kids were sick, so I'm sick. And no. Yes, there's all these germs floating around, but if we have a core root foundation of health and we have a strong immune system, then we can be around all kinds of germs and issues and we're not going to get sick. But this is also this testament to when we're not honoring emotions, or maybe there's a flood of them, like in my experience, and we had a lot of them, then we need to do extra to support the immune system in those times. So make sure that you're doing that. There's a lot of medications prescribed these days, and those do a number on our digestive system. And so if you are on any medications, just knowing that you need to do extra to support your digestive system and the lining specifically of your stomach. There's something called hydrochloric acid, and you may check out my website. I talk a lot about celery juice, because celery juice is a very powerful form of hydrochloric acid. And inside your stomach, you have a little pool of this hydrochloric acid. It's almost like it's waiting there for the food to come in, and so it can break down the food. The problem is most of us don't have enough hydrochloric acid in our stomach. And so we eat the food and then it doesn't break down properly. And then we get indigestion, or we get acid reflux, or we get stomach issues and bloating, and we don't often know why. And so there's a process of this digestive system. And the first step of our digestive system actually starts with smelling. When we smell delicious food, that smelling triggers an enzyme to be released in our saliva. And then we put the food in, and then that saliva, the enzyme, it starts breaking down the food, and then it goes down, and again, it signals to the stomach, make some hydrochloric acid, right? So adding in celery or other things that have hydrochloric acid, even taking a supplement if you feel it's necessary of hydrochloric acid, could be a really powerful thing, just to support that digestive system. Things like fermented foods and kombucha, like having this. Now, a little disclaimer that that's not for everybody. There are certain kinds of digestive issues that don't call for that stuff. And again, that's why you should work with a practitioner, or you should work with somebody who can help you know your body and what's really going on with it. Sometimes people around this time ask me a lot about probiotics, and I think probiotics are great, but I look at those a lot differently than most practitioners do. I almost look at them as an antibiotic. And what I mean by that very specifically is that they should be used for specific reasons. Each probiotic has a different strain. And, in our culture, we almost want to just take probiotics every day. And it shouldn't really work that way. I think you should use probiotics for very specific periods of time. And there are probiotics that are daily use probiotics, but for the most part, you want to give your body a break from things, so that way it has a chance to replenish and rebuild and figure out how to do the work on its own. And, so I like to use probiotics to repair and to replenish, I should say, maybe, and then sometimes take a little break from them and come back. And so just becoming aware that that's really, really important. Okay, so a few other things. Let me just look through my notes because I think I'm getting to my time and I'm talking so much. I don't know if there's any questions, but if there are, please write them below and I'd be so happy to answer them. You know, one of my clients often, you know, she asks me a lot about, like, how do I know if this is a craving, like an emotional craving, and how do I know if this is like really like my intuitive eating, needing this. And so I feel I'll mention a few things about that for everyone. So this one here is, how do you know if it's an emotional eating craving? It's very specific. So if you are like, I want Thai food and I want ice cream and I want X, Y, and Z, like, you know exactly what it is, then that craving is emotional. Okay. So it doesn't mean you might not want to eat the Thai food still sometimes. I get that. But what that's doing is it's a cue for you. It's a little red flag that's popping up and saying, hey, you have some emotion that is happening, not only in consciousness or in the subconscious, but also in your body. And it's, if you ignore it, it's not going to go away. And so you can try to eat it away with the food if you want to, and you can, but it's still going to be there when you're done. And so what we really need around that time is what I'll just say is space where we can honor. And I think journaling is a really powerful way to do that, because we can talk about what we're feeling. We even talk about our cravings and our food. And we start to get to know our body a little bit better. Other cravings around food that aren't that specific, you know, those come with time. Those come with you getting to know your body. In my video on my website around celery juice, I actually talk about how I would crave it. And a lot of people would respond to me and say, well, it must be nice, Renee, you crave celery juice and I crave pizza and ice cream. And I'm over here saying, I totally get it. Like, I used to, and by the way, it doesn't mean I still don't crave certain things, but you know, years and years ago, that's where I lived my life, was craving fast food and craving McDonald's and French fries. And, you know, if we crave fatty foods, instead of eating the French fries, eat some avocado and some nuts, right? Like, eat the good fats. That's a little key right there. But what happens over time, specifically around our bodies and connecting with ourselves, and when we get to know our emotions, and then we are able to start to release trauma from our body, that's when intuitive eating starts to open up for us. So I have a problem sometimes when I see so many people talk about intuitive eating, but they're not trauma informed. So, you know, I'll give you a very specific example. So sometimes when somebody has an experience of some trauma and maybe not even aware of it, they are doing anything they can to cope. And so maybe they decide to run away and like leave a situation, or maybe they freeze up, they don't know what to do. Or maybe they, like, you know, go into a fight mode or more aggression, or maybe they devour a whole ice cream, right? Like, I don't know, whatever it is. Those are not always things that we can control. And in our culture, we tend to want to point the finger at people. And I think it creates shame in people often, which is not healthy at all, that people are doing the best that they can with the experiences that they have had in their life. And so their reactions to hard situations is really based and rooted in their trauma response. And that's what they're doing, right? That's what you're doing. And so just recognizing that that's really important, and then honoring our emotions, honoring the connection to our body, and then also learning those coping strategies. And some of those coping strategies are really around grounding and breath work, and learning how to reconnect to being present in our body. There's a beautiful quote that I love, and it really basically says, like, if you let your emotions rule everything and you're going to kind of mess your life up, so to speak. And I don't really know that that's the exact quote, but it's something to that effect. And I have definitely allowed my emotions to rule my life, and it's caused some problems. So when I talk about emotions, I want to be really clear that there's an honoring, there's an honesty around them, but then it shifts eventually to us being able to focus our thoughts, us being able to train our mind to do things differently, us being able to say those affirmations that I was sharing earlier. But it's really, really hard to train our mind and really hard to train our thoughts if we're still stuck in not experiencing or expressing emotion, or if we're still stuck in trauma. And then on top of it, we're not feeding our foundation, our body, really well and supporting our digestive system. So I tend to love this kind of conversation. I could talk about it all day. So I really hope this makes sense for everyone. So please, if you have any questions, please just reach out, and I'd be happy to share. The bottom line here is you can't hide from your inner stuff. And because it's always going to be there unless you acknowledge and you look at it and you do the work. And it's really important for us to also know that we can spend a lifetime chasing the next diet and the next time chasing the next meal plan that we think we need, but that's really not going to be what does it for us. We kind of have to go deeper, and this is a call to do that. Check out my MY Nutrition 360, mynutrition360.com. That is one of my websites. My other website is reneejane.com. But My Nutrition 360 is a online course that I have that really is about everything I just talked about today, only this is where we do the work together. And it's very powerful, and it's done in a group dynamic where we also learn how to work through a lot of these emotional things with other people. And not to go on a big tangent, but it's really about emotional intimacy. And it's hard to do that work when we aren't in community with other people. I shouldn't say it's not impossible. In fact, you could do this work on your own, but it is more challenging to do it on your own. It's, I would say, maybe easier to do it when you have a community of people around you who you start to learn, wow, we may have not a lot in common, but we have a lot of deep things in common, right? And we start to know, okay, I'm not alone, and I can do this with other people. And so, if there's any resistance to that, reach out to me. You can have a private session with me, a free one just for a few minutes to see if it might be a fit, or you can register and get the information on that page. But we do the work for 6 months, and we have a call twice a month for 90 minutes. And then the big piece is I have a huge component of breath work, and the breath work is incredibly powerful, along with the somatic work where we learn how to ground in our body. We learn how to use coping strategies to release trauma from our body. And then there's also a cleanse that we work through. It's a very mild whole foods cleanse that I've been doing for over a decade, by the way. 1,000 people have gone through that cleanse. It's amazing. So those are some of the things that we do in My Nutrition 360. And then you get to get coaching from me and spot coaching. And we have a community forum that's a huge part of it. And it's beautiful. And I love this work, and I love that I get to do it and to be of service and to show up and talk with all of you today. So I think that's it. I'm starting to babble. I'm looking at my notes, and I think I'm good. So bottom line is nurture your root, right? And that is your digestive system, that is honoring your emotions, that is noticing the connection with your nervous system and the sensations that are happening in your body. That is breathing your body, breathing deeply down into your belly, and giving yourself permission to get curious about what's really going on, and asking yourself, what do I need? What do I need right now? And getting to know the self is about not only self-awareness, but then it leads eventually to this name of my business called Love Yourself, right? Love Yourself Naked means that we learn a practice to stripping down all the walls, all the things that have kept us from not showing up as our highest self. And we learn to love ourselves in that process of doing it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to chatting soon. Bye, everyone.